Greetings, humans. These are the movies I saw over the weekend. As within a review, this may contain spoilers. Psycho Killer. I was looking forward to this movie. The trailer really sold me on it, and then I went to see the film and it was disappointing. The movie style was a bit Jekyll and Hyde. Depending on who the story followed, the cop or the satanic serial killer, the style will switch, and not in a good way. When the story followed the cop, it was more grounded, which I enjoyed, but when it followed the serial killer, it was less old school slasher and more modern, effects heavy killings. I don't know this for a fact, but the blood from the killer's victims looked like CGI to me. Before I get too ahead of myself, the story follows Jane, a Kansas Highway Patrol officer played by Georgina Campbell, who recently came out in the highly enjoyable Cold Storage, which I reviewed. I'll leave a link to the review in the comments. Jane witnesses her husband's murder by the serial killer. His death is all she can think about, and she decides to do her own investigation and track him down. The first half of the story, I would say, was pretty good. Georgina does a great job anchoring the story, but my main issue with the movie is when it focuses on the serial killer. The vibe and kills reminded me of The Strangers, and that's not a good thing. The backstory and motivations of the killer were told by other characters, mostly Jane. While this may work, it also makes the killer less engaging. If the filmmakers didn't want the killer to be the vehicle that gives the audience his backstory and motivations, they could at least have given us some flashbacks. That being said, the way the story unfolded, we didn't learn who the killer was until the end. The following is spoiler territory, so you have been warned. Someone was referenced throughout the story, and that's who ended up being the killer. The killer was thought to be a copycat or highly inspired by that person. One issue with this is the physicality of the killer. He is a big guy. The actor who played the killer is James Preston Rogers, and he's 6'6". The killer is not an average guy, and you would think that would help the authorities narrow down the suspects and lead them to the serial killer being the person they thought was inspiring him. The ending screamed to me that the filmmakers were trying to make the killer into the next Michael Myers. Much like Michael Myers, no matter how much he gets hurt or even shot, he has some sort of supernatural ability to survive. While I was disappointed with the movie, that doesn't mean you would enjoy it and it may be worth watching. How to Make a Killing. It's considered a black comedy, but to me, that's being generous. For those unaware, black comedy is a film, play, or other work that deals with tragic or distressing subject matter in a humorous way. While I can see why people would call this movie a black comedy, it didn't really pan out that way. What the filmmakers did to give the story a black comedy feel was by cutting to the funeral quickly after each death. This was to symbolize a series of unfortunate events for this one family. To me, a black comedy incorporates clever deaths or accidental deaths in a humorous way. While the first death in the story could be considered accidental in a humorous way, the other deaths were less so. All that being said, whether this is considered a true black comedy is not the real issue, and I'll get to that in a bit. Before I continue, let me give you the synopsis. The story follows Beckett Redfellow, played by Glenn Powell, who is disowned at birth and decides to trim the family tree in order to claim his inheritance. Since Beckett is the youngest in the family tree, he is last in line to inherit the money. One by one, he goes after his family members. There's nothing particularly wrong with the story. It's more of a mishmash of ideas and characters that made it feel incohesive overall. There were some characters that I liked, such as Beckett, his girlfriend Ruth, and his uncle Warren. Everyone else felt like caricatures of what you would imagine a rich person would act like. Speaking of characters, my biggest issue with the film was Julia, played by Margaret Qualley. It was a very strange character, a bit of an enigma. The character felt out of place with the other characters in the story. It's to the point that I'm having a hard time describing her properly. She moved in a manner that was completely different from everyone else, which made her feel like she came from a different movie. While on one hand, she has a clear motivation, the way she went about it though felt off. There was this weird dynamic between Julia and Beckett that I was unable to connect with. They clearly liked each other, but something about their relationship never gelled for me. Not much else I can say. If you saw the film, let me know in the comments what you thought of Julia. Moving on to Glenn Powell. While this has no impact on the movie, from the films that I've seen of his, he seems to play similar characters. He plays these ultra confident characters who do go through trials and tribulations, but they all seem to come from the same tree, if you will. You can pluck one character and replace it with a similar one from one of his other movies. For me, he's starting to get close to being repetitive in the type of roles he takes on. So those were my thoughts on these films. What did you think of the movies? Leave a comment down below, subscribe, give the video a like, and see you in the next review.